If you look at any of the kind of countercultural theorists that came out of the 60s at Berkeley, the Neil Postmans, the Theodore Roszaks, you know, they really kind of fundamentally, even to the talking heads, like they kind of fundamentally, they meant something to me when I was studying French literature at Vanderbilt, Renaissance literature, which really was the period of literature that emerged after the invention of the printing press. And at first it was pornography and comedy, and then it went into more secular literature, you know, stories, dramas, etc. But it was always kind of the first to colonize is pornography and comedy. And then I started getting really into these kind of countercultural theorists that were looking at the time at mass communications like television and radio as these, you know, everything from Big Brother to numbing us to selling desire in America to creating this, you know, kind of religion of capitalism. Twitchell wrote this amazing book called Ad Cult, where he equated modern advertising capitalism to a religion. And it had its iconography, and it had its dogma, and it had it, if you do this, then this will happen, and if you use the American Express card, then you too will have 3% body fat walking down the beach with this beautiful person on your arm. And so those were all these, I think, precursors to what we're experiencing now, because I think we were really trained a set of values in capitalism that meant that money ruled all. And people, you know, we're talking about a troll president on Twitter now, but, you know, at the end of the day, a majority of people think that a person that has $1 billion is smarter than everyone else. And so at a fundamental level, if that's our religion, then this guy won. He's a winner. He's, you know, got his billions of dollars and his airplanes and his, you know, Twitter account, and he can speak directly to the masses. You never, so what I think is fascinating, you never heard Donald Trump Facebook this, right? Because that's not a raw feed anymore. That's controlled by algorithms. So he saw that Donald Trump tweets this because it's still a raw fire hose. And so it's still a direct connection. And so we're constantly seeing these arbitrages of these new characters that emerge. I mean, I represented 6,500 kids that had no fame whatsoever in the world 4 years ago. And then suddenly Vine came along and 6 seconds led to fame, and Instagram came along and, you know, Acacia Brinley took the perfect selfie and at 17 had 1 million followers on Instagram. And so our value system changed overnight, right? All the things that we held valuable, now we suddenly saw, and maybe it was always that way, but now we just had camera phones recording it, right? Sort of like when people make the comment about police brutality, like, well, it's always been there, it's just now we're recording it, now we're seeing it. And so I think that we're going through this really interesting phase, especially after this election, where we now have a majority of people connected in these systems, and we can now see a lot of different aspects of the world that we might not have been privy to because of this top-down media, right? The idea that, you know, the media was astonished that 60 million people in America voted a different way is kind of a joke. Like, you weren't listening, you were in such an echo chamber, you weren't, and so they're a victim of algorithmic, they're a victim of social segregation, of algorithmic segregation. And so I think that we're now starting to see everything for what it is. I think that we're actually starting to reabsorb our society, and we're starting to see it. And now we have these individual decisions to make at a very granular level that I don't think we ever thought of before. And I don't think that we saw our ramifications so vividly portrayed in real quantitative analysis. I mean, we're all getting data on ourselves now that we didn't have before. We never, maybe we mouthed off in class and said something to another person, and, you know, somebody said, oh, you're a jerk or whatever. But we didn't have large-scale lynchings like we have now in social media when you put something out there. I mean, think about the polarization that happened in this last election, where people are like, I'm unfriending you, I'm, you know, blocking you, I'm you know, it's like that just created the bigger schism in our society, except we're seeing it now. And I think that's the fascinating thing that's happening is, and that's why I keep going back to this idea of evolution. Evolution is not necessarily progress. It's one of the biggest themes of the book that I hope that people understand. because they're very nuanced ideas, but just because something is evolving and changing doesn't mean that it's moving forward in a progressive manner. It doesn't mean that it's getting better necessarily, right? We have, evolutionary moments throughout living history where things kind of went this way and they didn't work out so well and they died off and so hopefully a lot of these directions where we're kind of seeing hate for what it is, right? In immunology, there's a great example of this. If you look at the HIV virus, we've now been grappling with this, for over 30 years now. And scientists have gotten really good at containing it, right? You can take a combination of, drug cocktail of heart treatment, and you can go in and you can basically eliminate the virus from the bloodstream. But the virus is tricky in that it hides itself in dendritic cells and in very deep kind of in stem cell layer of our bodies, and it can hide out for 7, 10, 15 years. And so the second you stop suppressing HIV, it pops back up, it mutates, it becomes more virulent, et cetera. And so there are two big theories right now in modern kind of treatment for that. One is ferreting it out, trying to cause the body to trigger to release the kind of stored HIV by kind of shocking it and ferreting it out. I look at that a lot like what's going on with hate that's buried inside of these people. We suddenly had a catalyst that's ferreting out these hate emotions in our society. And then the other thing, and the other way to really cure it, if you look at the Berlin patient, for instance, or the Delta, I believe it's Delta 32 variant, was there 6% of living Northern Europeans that have an immunity to HIV, or to the most popular strain of HIV. And so what we're doing is, in science, we're now taking stem cells from those people and trying to rewrite a person that's infected with HIV's body so that they can recognize the antigen of HIV and so that they can use their own immune system to either protect against it or to get rid of it, right? To either inoculate yourself against HIV and change the actual T cells floating around in your bloodstream, or to actually teach it how to recognize that as a virus, as a foreign antigen, and to then rid itself by using the own body's machinery. So you're really reteaching your body that this is bad. I look at our culture right now as the exact same analogy, because we have to teach ourselves at a cellular level that this is bad, right? I start the book off with the Confederate flag, for instance. It took 150 years and a mass shooting in South Carolina for us, and a guy draped in the Confederate flag saying he wanted to create a race riot, for us to suddenly realize that maybe that flag is racist. Maybe it's a symbol of hate. Maybe it's a symbol that we need to get rid of in our culture. And so it then takes us as individuals to learn that and to change ourselves and to not propagate that, or to learn how to squash it out at a local level. And so I think the exact same thing that we're learning now with immunotherapy for HIV, for cancer, for all those things, about teaching our body that this is bad, I think we're now learning that in our society of maybe the Heil Trump is a pretty terrible thing that we should squash out pretty quickly in our society and not let it happen. But had he not been there, that would stay underground. And would it fester? Would it get worse? I think there's a good moment that we're seeing this for what it is, so that we can act upon it in a very organic, natural way, and hopefully get rid of this in our society as fast as possible without letting it rise up and fester. And the notion that our media or us were surprised that 60 million people around us thought differently is a big warning sign. Who would be surprised that 60 million people thought differently if you were aware of what they were thinking and you weren't living in a bubble? So that's what I think is the biggest opportunity right now with what we're seeing in this new social culture emerging.